Hello, plant-based buddies. Happy Monday. I am again on my lunch break and wanted to come in and talk about organic versus conventional produce. Someone asked a comment or posted a comment in one of my latest videos, um, and it stirred up some questions and some debates, and I love that. Um, so let's talk about organic versus conventional produce. So I think that everyone has to be aware of what we call the nature or the appeal to nature fallacy, meaning that because something is natural, it must absolutely be safer. People have to understand the nuances here because that's not always true. I think it appeals to what we want to hear, and we all feel kind of warm and cozy when we think about something being natural. But for people who know the difference, or people that are well educated in chemistry, biochemistry, or organic chemistry, they understand that anything can be a poison. It depends on the dose, okay? Synthetic or not. And I'll give you the example for organics, okay? Now, to be organic, you have to avoid using GMOs and avoid using synthetic pesticides. That would assume that organic pesticides or natural pesticides are safe. Now, keep in mind that most natural pesticides are made from copper, and since they're much less effective than synthetic pesticides, you have to use a lot more. And we already know that copper is also at high dose a toxic substance. There's a condition called Wilson's disease where people accumulate too much of it. So kind of keep in mind that definitions are loose and there's a lot more nuance than thinking that organic is good or conventional is bad. Firstly, some of the synthetic pesticides that we use are so potent that they can be used at such a low dose that they are not harmful for humans. Now, there's a lot of fear mongering going on, and someone asked the questions in the comment of my last video, did I think about the EWG? Now, I want to make sure to talk about that for a second because it's a very complex question to answer. The EWG, or the Environmental Working Group, is an organization who likes to have its stamp of approval on certain products deemed to be more natural or more safer. Now, I want to keep in mind that this label is completely a marketing tactic used by companies, and there's a lot of fear-mongering going there. I'll explain in more nuance. EWG is a company. It's not good or bad, and I'm not knocking organic foods. I buy organic blueberries, just so everyone knows. But I want to make sure that people understand the nuances, okay? So don't come at me in the comments that I'm anti-organics. That's really not the case. EWG is a organization that's funded by the organics industry, and they do put a lot of fear-mongering out there, scaring people into buying conventional produce and wanting them to switch toward organic. First example is the Dirty Dozen. Now, the Dirty Dozen, for people that have not heard about that, is a list of the 12 foods that contain the most pesticides. Now, keep in mind the strawberries come at the top of the list every single year, and if you go on social media, you'll see a ton of videos claiming that you have to wash your strawberries, even people putting some baking soda and some vinegar and soaking it for 15 minutes and making sure that you rinse all the pesticides off. Now, I don't disagree that people should be washing their produce. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that...
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Even Siri doesn't get it, okay? My watch has been going crazy the last few days. What people need to understand is that the EWG relies from the USDA's data, okay, that measures the amount of pesticides on foods. Now, even the foods that contain the highest amounts of pesticides still contain hundreds of times less than toxic doses for humans. So even your strawberries that are the dirtiest, and it's very tactical and thought out plan to call it a dirty dozen. It's easy to remember, it's catchy, but there's a lot of fear mongering. People now are afraid of buying conventional strawberries because they think they're filled with pesticides, when even the dirtiest pesticides contains about 400 times less the amounts of pesticides that you would need to consume per day to reach any toxic levels. So that, and just to frame it another way, that means that you would need to eat 400 servings of strawberries every single day to reach toxic levels of pesticides. For those that aren't aware of toxicology, it's not either good or bad, it's the dose times the exposure length. And that's the difference in toxicology between risk and hazard, okay? Hazard is if at any dose a substance can cause toxicity. In Europe, their guidelines are really hazard based. And that's why a lot of people will say, well, that substance is banned in Europe and we're putting it on our food in the States or in Canada. It's because our legislation is different, okay? In Canada and US, we adopt a risk-based assessment. And the risk equals hazard times exposure, and exposure equals the dose times the time to which you're exposed to a substance. I'll give you an example. Aspartame. Okay, people have a black and white view of aspartame. Aspartame is an artificial sweetener that's put in diet sodas. So I've heard patients say that diet sodas are worse than original sodas and sugar-filled sodas because they're filled with aspartame. Certain countries maybe ban aspartame because it's a hazard. A hazard means that somewhere, sometimes in a study, we've shown that about 40 grams of aspartame, I'm throwing out numbers, don't quote me on that, hundreds of grams of aspartame were given for lengths of time to rodents. And we noticed that there was a slight increase in the amount of brain tumors in rodents. So what happened is that now fear-mongering says aspartame causes cancer. It's crazy because it doesn't. And all of the data and all of the outcome data that you have in adults, in normal human beings, not rodents, say that you would have to drink something like 40 some liters of Diet Coke every single day, long term, to get anywhere near the amount of aspartame that were given to the rodents in the studies. People associate mechanistic data, the lowest levels of proof, done in rodents, the lowest levels of proof, with outcome data from prospective cohort studies, meta-analysis, randomized controlled trials, or systematic reviews done in humans. So even if the lower levels of proof say something bad is going to happen with your aspartame, if every other study that's better powered to show a difference in adults and in humans says the complete opposite, this is the correct conclusion, not this one. But this one underneath, the lower levels of proof get used to fearmonger. There's no surprise that most of these studies are marketed, or more that these fear-mongering tactics are targeting women with young children. Don't feed this to your kids, it's filled with cancer-causing chemicals. And I can't imagine how complicated it should be for the general public to try to figure all of this out. You can't trust organic, and you can't trust conventional, and you can't trust anyone. Now, people are dying from cancer and from cardiovascular disease, are top killers, not because of pesticides, because they're not eating enough effing fruits and veggies. So if you're one of those who avoids buying produce because it's not organic or organic is too expensive, don't waste your time. Even And what I mean is, don't waste your time not buying it. Buy conventional, buy frozen, buy whatever floats your boat. Now, if it's $1 more for a crate of blueberries, I think that it appeases my mind to buy organic blueberries. But if it's not, I still buy blueberries and I still rinse them with water. I don't put them in baking soda for 15 minutes and rinse them off with white vinegar. You can do that if you want. There's no worries. No worries. You're reducing the pesticide content of your food. But the reason that people are suffering from chronic disease is because they don't eat enough fruits and veggies, not because they're eating pesticides, okay? Even the dirtiest of the produce on the Dirty Dozen contain hundreds of times below the required levels to cause harm. And like I say, that's the difference between risk and hazard. In Europe, if there's any hazard, any mechanistic low-level studies here that show harm, it's banned. It's very often banned. And in the States and Canada, we understand what risk is. Risk is hazard times exposure, and exposure is dose over time. So some synthetic chemicals will be banned in Europe, but they will not be banned over here because we use risk and we don't use hazard studies. That's the difference. And some people use that, and that's an argument that I hear a lot. Oh, it's banned here. Why are we putting that in our foods? Is you have to understand the nuances, okay? And it's so sad that a lot of fear mongering is being used, and people feel guilty, and people who've had cancer before or already suffer from chronic disease, they feel bad and anxiety, and even some people suffer from disordered eating because they fear conventional produce, and they think they're doing something wrong if they're not buying organic. That's just not the case. Eat fruits and veggies as much as you can, regardless of it conventional or organic. If you can afford organic and you want to eat that way and it makes you sleep better at night, go right ahead. But pesticides are not the reason that people have a chronic disease epidemic. Okay? Does that make sense? Right on. Keep in mind that natural is not always better than synthetic or chemical. And if so, people just don't, people who think that don't have a basic knowledge of biochemistry, organic chemistry, basic chemistry, biology, and toxicology. So understand the difference between risk and hazard. Hazard being the dose times the exposure. And also keep in mind that certain countries don't have the same laws or legislations. That's why certain countries ban certain products and we don't. And stop the fear mongering. If you want to wash your strawberries in baking soda and white vinegar, that's freaking awesome, and you are quite the motivated person. I rinse them with water and I eat them. And sometimes I even pick a blackberry without rinsing it. I just kind of roll the dice. Now, I'm not trying to make fun of anyone here. It's just that I've seen patients be legit anxious and develop patterns of disordered eating because they feel guilty eating conventional produce, even some that avoid, saying, oh, it's filled with pesticides. Like I say, my last words will be, even the dirtiest foods on the Dirty Dozen list have hundreds of times lower levels of pesticides that are toxic to humans. All right? Very unpopular opinion, but it's based in science. It's not based in emotion. I eat organic when I can because I sleep better at night, but you ask me for my medical scientific opinion, not my emotional opinion. And emotions play a major role in what people buy at the store, right? Big companies try to figure out what makes you tick. And the EWG is not a bad organization, but you just have to keep in mind that they're also profit-based, and they also sell synthetic pesticides, and they're funded by organics industries that sell natural pesticides. I meant to say natural, non-synthetic. They sell natural pesticides. That doesn't necessarily make them a bad company or a good company. It's just that when a lot of the strategies to sell are based in fear mongering and creating anxiety in the consumer, that's where I kind of disagree. Cool. I'd love to hear your comments because I have the impression that I'm going to have stepped on some toes by saying that organics is a marketing strategy. And it's really easy to get caught up in the emotions of buying organic. And I do totally understand that the natural sounds better than the chemical. And I tend to say the less medication, the better. But that's the condition that you're living your life the right way to start with, right? Let's just say that if you're obese and have chronic disease, the issue is not your pesticides in your produce. The issue is probably you're not eating enough produce, okay? Not enough plants, fruits, veggies, legumes, nuts, and seeds, and whole grains. So eat more of those to start, and that's going to save your life, not avoiding pesticides. Coolio. All right. Hopefully you won't get much of a backlash. Thank you for listening to the end. Let me know what you think of this video. Let me know what you think of my comments on organic food. Hopefully some of you will actually find some solace in knowing that you don't necessarily have to be paying exorbitant prices to buy healthy food. Cool. Peace.